I'm on record as well.
Let's call the Monroe County Commissioners Court to order this Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, at 9:03 a.m. This Wednesday. Asking someone to call the roll.
Judge Gray, Commissioner Weir, Commissioner Eager,
Here.
Commissioner Leeson,
Here.
Commissioner Riley.
Here. Please join us in the pledges of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I protect the flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please remain standing for the invocation of the court right and lead us in prayer and special session.
Okay. Come up here like Ronnie did.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, sir. This is a surprise, but that's all right. God's never surprise. Father, good morning to you. We thank you for such a wonderful day you have blessed us with. The weather, God, is super, super. Thank you. That's why we're so blessed to live in this state. Today, God, we ask you for wisdom. We ask you for guidance. And we ask most of all that your will be done. We ask that your presence will overshadow, that your people will prevail. And God, whatever happens today, we accept it as your will. I thank you for every commissioner, judge, everyone in this room today, God, because we're all your servants. What a privilege it is to serve your kingdom. We give you praise and glory. We ask you for these things. We thank you for them. In the wonderful name of Jesus Christ. All together say, amen. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
My plan today is to ask for, I guess we'll have to work this out. How you want to process it. I'm going to defer to commissioners, county, and Assistant County Attorney Ashby, and really up to their comments, and they have hit on whatever I said. But with that said, I have been asked a number of times if our plan is to come to a conclusion of final vote today. I would love that. I would love it if we could adopt a set of subdivision regs today, but by the same token, if we still have homework to do, there's still things to be done, I want to do something halfway. I'd clean that up a bit. We may or may not, in my mind, we may or may not reach a conclusion today. Things are happening together. So, you have done a lot of work and provided materials, and everybody's had a chance to review them. How do we want to approach this?
If I could, I would like to discuss what I think is probably the biggest bone of contention. I have gone through your regulation and conformed it to the current law as best I could. I've added a provision on firearms in subdivisions. I've added some reference to rainwater we'll discuss later. But I would like to discuss the dilemma that the legislature has created for us this last legislative session. I've handed out to you the revised 232.001. In that definition of when a plat is required, it says the owner of a tract of land located outside the limits of the municipality must have a plat of the subdivision prepared if the owner divides the tract into 2 or more parts, or to lay out 1, a subdivision of the tract including an addition, 2, lots, or 3, streets, alleys, squares, parks, or other parts of the tract intended by the owner to be dedicated to public use. The prior version of this statute, after public use, came a comma, and then essentially it said, or dedicated to the purchasers or owners of lots, area of the streets, parks, otherwise that adjoins their property in the subdivision. So we looked primarily at lots over 10 acres. To that distinction, it doesn't have interior roads, and we could apply subdivision rules for public roads and for private roads. Didn't make any difference.
See that, I hate the interject, I was hoping to be quieter, but, since you brought that up, to give meaning to the legislative change, to me that says that it used to say that you set out streets, alleys, squares, parks, and other parts of the tract for public use. And then they took out, or, let me see, it was or private residence. And so now, if they only have it for exclusive private use of the property owners within, say, a gated subdivision, that's not public, then it doesn't qualify for Item 3, does it?
Well, that's the dilemma. If you read that section, it's saying any subdivision of the tract requires a plat. Or if there are lots in the subdivision, that requires a plat. Or then you have the dilemma.
1, 2, and 3 are discounted.
Yeah.
Got it.
So there is an argument to be made that only the dedication of the streets only applies to public dedication. And the difference would be that anything under it's private would not be subject to subdivision regulation. Well, obviously that means that pretty soon, maybe not immediately, but pretty soon, there won't be any public dedication. Because you can avoid the requirements of planning by making it a private subdivision. So that, I need some guidance from you on that. Your lot requirements now are such that this is going to come up here pretty quick. Now, I expect that the legislature did not necessarily intend to obviate or do away with subdivision regulation entirely.
So to move this along as best we can, open it up to be contradicted. I believe that the court unanimously believes that if we have to be the test, we'll be the test, but we're not going to give up on the health and safety aspects of this whole Local Government Code 232 by saying that it's not subdivision because they privatize the streets and alleys.
And that's the interpretation that I tend to favor myself.
But I can speak for them, I would like to speak.
Let me just continue just for a second. I've got an AG opinion. It's an early opinion. It came out in 1989, but it held this. I I've got to explain, at one point, the legislature, there was a case called Elgin Bank. And because of Elgin Bank, it said that if there were no internal streets in an area that was being subdivided, the subdivision rules didn't apply. The legislature came back after Elgin Bank was decided and amended this section and included the definition that we've already discussed, where public and private subdivisions, interior roads was the distinction. This case, this AG opinion comes up just before Elgin Bank, I think, and it held that under the local government code 232.001A, a subdivision of a tract of land outside the limits of a municipality into two or more parts, whether the division to layout, subdivision, addition, or suburban or building lots, is subject to planning requirements of the section, only if the division is also to lay out streets, alleys, squares, parks, or other parts of the tract intended to be dedicated to public use or for the use of purchasers or owners of lots fronting on or adjacent thereto is provided by this subsection. So this AG opinion, it's problematic to a broader interpretation of that. But my interpretation of the rule as it stands is that the requirements of the plat only apply to 10-acre lots or greater. But if you divide a subdivision in larger tracts than 10 acres, 10.01 acre, is there supposed to be a subdivision regulation? I think that leads to inevitable chaos and, as you say, public safety concerns. Essentially, the developer under the first two subsections of 232.001 would have to file a plat. But then if they can not develop a plat as a result of having more than 10 acres, they can have all the streets they want, as narrow as they want, and this court would not have jurisdiction. I can't believe that's what the legislature intended.
Let me take a poll because you have now confused me a little bit. Today, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Today, we only require for today the 10.0 applies, and if somebody does a subdivision that is where everything is everything, it's more than 10 acres. We only require a filing plan. Am I right?
No, not unless if they build an interior road, then we were going to do it. So if they have 10 acres and they abut the state highway or a county road, maintained road, then they don't have to file, they don't have to go through the rules. But if they build a street inside of it, that's automatic.
That's the way I view it.
Do we agree or disagree that whatever the state law is trying to say, that even if they're 10-acre tracts or more, and there is a street, alley, etc., that we want this, while we don't require an actual final plat, we do expect them to meet specs for safety specs for roads. No? Yes? 3 yeses and a.
So I guess the question I have is, we still want them to require a final plat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yes, you do, you just don't require.
Because,
If they lay out roads.
yeah,
If there are interior streets within the subdivision, you want planning.
Okay. But, but how does that, where is the 10-acre piece in 232?
There's not a definition in 232, but it comes in other places.
Oh, it's an exception.
But if we want to make sure that they're building the roads to our specs, there's no other way besides filing a final plat and doing the construction bond and everything else to make sure that they're building it up to specs.
Right. Otherwise, you're gonna have 30-foot roads, you're gonna have caliche roads, whether they would be load bearing or not, you don't know.
In the health and safety code, it has to say that when we're trying to fight wildland fires within a subdivision, it is impossible to run large tipper trucks back and forth with a 30-foot dirt road.
Yeah.
With an evacuation.
So I'm trying to say there are houses, life persons and property. Life.
Well, my recommendation is that you would still require them to file a plat. That very well could lead you to be sued.
Well, the worst that can happen, besides unfortunately having to spend funds to defend ourselves, is that somebody clarifies the law.
Eventually, there will be a lawsuit filed somewhere, whether it's in Blanco or other counties, and it will become precedent. The AG opinion is not binding, it's persuasive, but not binding. And I think the court could choose to ignore it or at least take it under some advisement. But for purposes of preserving your option, continuing to require subdivision planning on any subdivision that has interior streets seems to me to be a better rule. 232.001 on its face would apply to all subdivisions. So if there's any private on a smaller lot, 232 seems to say, well, then you've got to have, you can't plat it. There are other sections where exemptions are mentioned, the family exemption, and we will cover those in your ordinance.
And I just managed to unconfuse myself. I'm surprised Ms. Ashby didn't get it for me, but that we require plats because the exemption says 10 acres and conjunctive. There has to be no streets or alleys.
Right, so just to be clear, if a person has a parcel of land and there are roads all around it, you could build a subdivision that fronts all of those roads, doesn't have interior streets, and it would not be subject to subdivision. But if they have to have an interior street to get to lots in the subdivision, that's then the bright line rule. So,
Is there anyone that doesn't want to follow that? So I think we're resolved. That's where we'll go.
well, that being said, next I'd like to talk about the rainwater request harvesting. There presently is not necessarily a rule that pertains. So I'm going to hand out guidelines for rainwater harvesting. I say hand out, I only got one copy. There is also a manual that's this volume. I think that there ought to be reference to the published materials. Now, note that those were drafted in 2012, and the manual is somewhat, it was sometime in that. But that's the only official publication publications that TCEQ has published. So I think that we can't necessarily require rainwater harvesting, but if somebody wants to do it, they would have to comply with the regulations that are in place.
So, and I don't know if you've seen what I added to okay, so I added the resolution, from the conservation district. I just added a resolution and I added a little verse. Nothing that's technically requiring anybody to do it, it's just, please keep that in mind.
And I think specific reference needs to be made at least to the current standards, so that they're understanding that if I build a rainwater collection, I still have to have water treatment, which is required by us. I say required, it's suggested. If it's a public use, by public use, it means any more than 25 people using it, it has to be treated. If it's private use,
But any public use water collection has to be done through TCEQ.
yeah. So that's just something that we would add to the ordinance that in addition to what you did.
So for this item, just trying to get a checklist, are you or is Connie just gonna go back and incorporate that?
I've already done that in my draft copy.
Awesome.
And I will add some additional references to these particular publications.
Great.
Okay, that being said, the rest of the ordinance is pretty much as we discussed and circulated. And I don't know, I've got to go back through and repaginate and make the formatting all consistent. I'd like to just very briefly go through the ordinance. As I noted, as a result of changes made in session before, the ability to require a preliminary plat has been done away with. We only now have a plat. And so I've gone through the regulation and made those changes. I tried to leave your ordinance as existing as much as possible. Your ordinance is comprehensive. It's pretty detailed, but I did not try to change it too much. The first place that I would point you to, I've not really made much in the way of changes. In 104.130, would be one place in which the reference to 232.001A, it says 3. But we would need to take the 3 out because the 3 only refers to public dedication.
So in 104.130 you said? What about 104.120?
Anywhere
Anywhere that has a 3, we just need to take the 3 out.
right.
Where's the 3?
That's, we could leave that reference as it is, but it's gonna create more confusion.
Right.
So I would recommend that we take the 3 out and just refer, A out and refer.
Okay, still confused.
Just like 104.135, that's what I'm saying.
130 or 120. There's about 3 or 4 references, other exceptions in the order.
I still don't see the 3.
Judge.
Still don't see the 3.
It's in the highlighted yellow.
A3?
You just take the 3 out.
have to take the tree out.
Okay. While we're on that section, I had a note, I was looking at the whole tree there. Why are we leaving it at,
60 feet.
no, accidentally, that's fine. Great.
In several places, we've taken the 250 feet out and inserted 60 feet
But we didn't at 135.
in 135, for example. And you ask why?
So I guess my goal was, whenever I was working on this and trying to get anything that was 10 acres or larger, I thought we could allow them to bump down to a 60-foot easement. But if it's 6 acres, 5 to 6 acres, then I would like to go back to keep the 250 foot. Can I do that or not?
Only reference to setbacks or to linear feet along the right of way that are referenced, have reference to roads or streets. And so your discretion to greater than 60 feet is at least questionable.
So why, 60 feet is in the statute?
So if I'm in the textile world, I have to be 400 foot before I can have entrances. So with my driveway permit, if I'm trying to keep people from having driveway, that was the reason for the 250 feet.
And I think 250 feet is okay, but it's unsupported by the direct statute.
So this is kind of more policy. I don't understand, it almost seems counter. I don't understand why we only do 60 feet for a larger tract and 250 feet for a smaller tract.
Well, thinking that larger tracts would have more highway frontage anyway.
Well, that's just, that's nice thinking, but it doesn't track with flag laws.
I have no objection to keeping it at 250 feet.
It's just an invitation.
Yes, I was just, it's kind of an incentive. If you it's going to be more than 10 acres, you can drop down to a smaller driveway. If you're not, then.
Could I move back to 104, 120 on the family division? Where I thought we had talked about taking out the 4.
You can.
4 is statutory.
It's statutory. Okay, so I was at one time.
Don't ask me why, because there are larger families than 4, but potential for having internal streets to get to those lots has been the problem.
So my only imaginative way of getting around the 4 family allowance, if you have, say, 10 kids, is that each of them is going to be more than 10 acres.
That's what I was hoping to do, is substitute 10 acres only, per division versus the 4.
Well, it's not really a substitute, it would just be a different exemption.
You can grant exemption on an ad hoc basis. And I tend to think that might be a better way to handle it.
You mean with variance?
An exemption, where they wouldn't have to comply with any of the regulations.
If they follow the exception, the family division, and then sell it to somebody who's not a family member, they didn't have to comply.
If they sell a lot to somebody who's not, they would have to sell.
It's Kim trying to get hers adjusted.
If all of the lots are being sold to family members. Now, if it's sold to a family member today, and that person turns around and wants to sell that lot to somebody else, then that becomes its own smaller subdivision. So,
But if it's subdivided between me and my 3 brothers, and, I inherited, and then I just turn around and sell it the entire tract, there's nothing that changes. It's not another subdivision at that point in time, because if the deed is, if it's already done, and it's already filed, and I go back and sell from me to Charles, then it's, you know.
Well, it depends, I think, somewhat on the size of the lot, but assuming, let's say it's, ends up being 12 acres for each of you.
Let me,
Yeah.
let me see if you can clarify that for me. If the division is 4, they're over 10 acres, and they're coming out on a family easement they've had forever. And then, okay. And one of the 4, sells to an outside party. If it's an individual that they're selling to, can that individual adopt the easement or comes with part of that sale and the maintenance agreement or whatever it might be there?
That comes, yeah.
That
When interior roads exist on a family plot, tract of land, and there is an assumption legally that those interior roads transfer with the property. In other words, an easement that was there for mom and pa for years as convenience of the division of the property. As far as being, does that count as an interior street or road? Once it's subdivided, the family exception would not alter that. It would be a private easement, but it would not be a public road. And so the 10-acre rule and your subdivision regs would apparently require it to be subdivided. If the 12-acre lot, for example, would then be subject to your subdivision when sold to somebody else. If they have to use that street, then they would have to get to that lot, it would come to them as a private use, but it would not come to them for public purposes.
So when they purchase that, an outside person purchases that, it has in the deed restrictions that they have the right to use that.
Yeah.
They still have to.
They would still, if their intent is to divide it further, they'd have to do the subdivision. There's no intention for them to subdivide.
No, I'm talking about just buying another house.
Yeah.
Could they use that existing, the family?
Yeah.
So going back to road frontage for a moment. If your comment was, since TxDOT's got their own set of requirements, and you're trying to work with 400-foot separation of driveways, and you're talking about 250 foot of road frontage for
6 acres.
6 acres or less.
6 acres. Lots larger than 6 acres. Well, let's see, no.
No, you're talking 60 feet for 10 acres and 250 feet for.
The way it's in here right now, it's lots larger than 6 acres. So, I would think to put it at 250 feet.
Or lots smaller than 6 acres. Is that right?
Larger.
250 feet for lots larger than 6
And maybe that needs to change to 5 acres instead of 6 acres.
Well, regardless, what is it for smaller lots?
That's the minimum.
250.
250.
You want 250 for every.
Once you get to 10 acres or larger, then you can drop down to 60 foot.
Right, and so I do not understand, I'm still picking at you, and while I still have the issue of why a larger tract should get a smaller road frontage, I do not understand how that's gonna help you comply with the TxDOT standard of 400 feet if you put 3 10-acre tracts side by side, but there's only 180 feet separating the 3. And TxDOT and 3 driveways coming out.
So you're referencing basically just flag lots.
I am.
Yeah, they're,
I guess.
With 250 foot, you can cut out the flag lots. Right?
Well, certainly.
The 60-foot is also on the flag lot issue. What was happening with flag lots is there were multiple lots that might only have 10 foot. And then they would put those together to make a 60 foot.
You experienced that.
And so to prevent that, the 60 foot is the standard width of a county road. So, theoretically by joining 6 together, you end up with 360 feet wide, well, there's no need for that, but 60 foot would be the minimum. That would apply to smaller lots. It could apply to larger lots, but that's the question.
So
The way you have it worded now, the property is at least 12 acres before dividing, and the average size of all parts after division is 6 acres. Then you would require a minimum of at least 60 feet. That's going down to the smaller unit. Now, 250 feet, in a smaller situation of lots, you may not have 250 feet.
What I'm trying to grapple with is, would this be setting someone up with an argument to go to TxDOT and say, I can't get you your 400 feet between driveways. The county only requires that I have 60 foot of right of way. And that's what I've got, not right of way, road frontage, and that's what I've got. And so, would we be somehow juxtaposing our regs against TxDOT's?
So in that scenario, we won't approve any plat until they have a TxDOT permit. So if they can't get their TxDOT permit because they can't get their 400 foot, then that's, they won't even come to our desk.
I understand that, what I'm saying is, will this be a way of compelling or making it a passion plea to TxDOT that I gotta have a driveway to get out of my road, get out of my property, and I can't meet your 400 feet because I only have 60 feet. And the next guy only has 60 feet, and the next guy only has 60 feet.
I don't know why we're trying to figure out what TxDOT requires. We have 60 feet, and the person next to it for 30 years had a piece of property that's 50 feet. Our old piece of property out front, and they decided to get a TxDOT permit. That's their only way out. We landlocked them. I believe they need a permit from TxDOT on that narrower piece of property. So I'm wondering why we need to make sure that TxDOT has 400 feet or 500 feet.
Well, my other reason would be, we're willing to get sued on, we're standing on health and safety for everything we're doing in these subdivision regulations. And I think that TxDOT's 400 foot standard, for 40 is a health and safety measure. That's why, that's the idea, so you know why that would be my answer why.
And of course, the 400 feet only applies if your only outlet is to a state highway.
Yeah.
If you got an outlet to an interior street,
Oh, that's wrong.
60 feet gives you, I don't know, my frontage on my lot is maybe 80 feet, but half of it's taken up by a driveway.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, like the uniform on traffic control devices and other things like that, it's based, your distance between driveways is based on the speed limit of the road.
It's 0.80 for every 10 miles an hour. So we take 55 times 0.80 at 407 feet.
All right, if the four of you are happy with the numbers now being proposed, I just assume you will apply.
I'm happy with it. I think that the 60 foot, on lots larger than 10 acres is, hopefully, the design of it will all work out. My question still is, can we, for lots 6 acres, can we go to 250? Can we,
Well, before you answer that, I think I'm finally understanding the reasoning. Is you could have along a state highway, 6, 6, 6, 6, and 6, and that would be a lot of driveways. And for sure, you're gonna run afoul of TxDOT safety standards with all those driveways, unless we require them to have.
right, that's my thought process, when you got this tract of land that abuts the highway, any highway, if you're creating 10 acre tracts, it's kind of harder to do a bunch of flag lots and scenarios, that's not, you know. And it's also an incentive to keep your tracks larger than, you know, a little larger track.
And I interrupted you, but wasn't the question is, can we do that?
Yes.
So I think you could have any, as long as it's, I think you could do that. You could have brackets, if you're under 6 acres, then it goes down to 60 feet, right?
Oh, if it's under 10, I think it might need to be a little reworded, but lots 10 acres or greater can go to 60-foot frontage, but pretty much below that's 250 foot, like we have today.
Well, like I say, if you get down to smaller lots, if they're being served by a public water system.
So we'll say lots. We can change that to lots 5 acres larger, because in our world right now, you gotta have a 5-acre tract to get water or well in the septic. If you go with a TCEQ approved water system, then your lot size can shrink further.
Yeah.
But it makes it nice and simple if we say 5,
Right.
so that it comports with our other standards.
Yeah. So I guess is the court good with for 5 acres, from 5 to 10 acres, are we good with 250 foot of frontage? And then 10 acres or above, 60 foot of frontage?
That's fine with me.
That didn't make sense to me, so 5 to 10, and what's less than 5?
Less than 5 will have to, that will have to be in a table further down the list. Because it's not described in this. Because in order to get a well in the septic, everybody's going 5 acres. So unless you have a public water system, or a public water and a public wastewater system, that's the only way you can get below 5 acres.
But you probably will have subdivisions that meet that standard.
They do, we do, and I believe further in we have a chart that talks about driveways, you know,
Yeah.
smaller than 5 acres. This is under the exceptions, and we're just trying to, you know, exempt from doing a policy or a plat, then, you know, that's possible.
Okay.
Next.
Which I would have done.
So, all right, I think I got it.
So can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
All right. So all the confusion that started this was with one of the House bills and bills that got signed on September 1st.
Yes, sir.
Which exact House bill, Senate bill was that?
House Bill 3697. 3697, House Bill.
Oh, House bill. Okay.
Now, there was a bill, a companion that came out of the Senate, and there were differences in it. There were substantial changes in the Senate that went to the conference committee, and the House refused to accept the Senate. So it went to a conference committee, and they adopted the House Conference Committee suggestion. And it all centered, I say it all, it eventually came down to this public-private dispute. Jim Allison, my partner, was monitoring that bill, and he said when it went, or the committee came back to the floor for approval, there was a debate. And an official position against it for fear that the Senate might come back. And so it was a horse trade, and made at the last minute. And I'm not sure it was well thought through, so that's where we have the dilemma, you might say. It was done in some haste, and
Is there any other Senate bill, House bill that is affecting
there are
subdivision rules?
minor changes in other places, but this is, of the changes that were made to the ordinance, this is the biggest one.
Was that Senate Bill 194?
Maybe, I don't remember which it was, since it didn't pass.
Okay, and it wasn't Senate Bill 194.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Bass, on 104-200, I have highlighted here in green, I just want to confirm this as of May 13th, 1996. Do you have any recollection of what that date?
I don't, that was in your original.
So, Connie, do you know, is that the date that it was done when when the county declared which roads were county maintained roads?
I believe that might be correct.
I think that's what it's in reference to, so that was, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take that.
Take that out.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna unhighlight it, and I'm pretty sure that's what that was in reference to.
Why we needed to.
It's referring to the division of public exempt from the.
Affidavit of land location.
So on 1A, we want to remove that May 13th, 1996.
So I'm asking.
The Kermit refers to that date for something within the septic.
Can we check on that?
So let's leave it, I'm gonna leave it highlighted green.
I have not looked up what happened on that day.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even grammatically very good. It should either be after or before or something, but as of, maybe. 1996, maybe. That's a specific day.
But I think we'll confirm that date and then we can reword either prior to or after, you know, so. But anyway, I don't want to hold this up. So.
Can I ask one quick question on A, on 104-200A? It says in all instances, the division of property is exempt from the requirement the plat is approved by Commissioner's Court. The owner shall prepare and send it to the county commission
Right.
or an affidavit. Does that mean that it does not come back to the Commissioner's Court?
See, that's my goal. I don't think that it's fair, if a person is trying to divide up their land and they need an exemption, I don't think that it's fair that they have to hold up until we have a court hearing to verify it. They should be able to take it to a commissioner themselves and say, I need this exemption by this rule, and the commissioner can sign off on it and they can move right down the road.
And then you mean move down the road, we'll get it recorded,
Correct.
closed.
So what?
I mean, once they do that affidavit plan and you approve it as a commissioner, where does it go from?
Then it's showing that they're exempt from the rules and regulations and they can start doing their division of land based on the exemption that you signed off.
It comes,
No.
no, so can they take that agreement that you approved and go and have it recorded?
Yeah,
It's done.
right, it's done.
That's right.
It streamlines their process to make them, you know, they're not waiting on commissioner's court.
The more interesting question for me is, what happens when one of you disagrees?
Then they would have to, in my opinion, they'd have to protest back to the court.
Or go to the court for variance.
Yeah, well, yeah, you'd have to go to, I mean, obviously it's set out in there what the exemptions are. If you don't meet it one way or the other, then you don't meet it. You'd have to get a variance.
Just that makes it clear. Okay.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Bass?
Yeah, I have some affidavit land location exceptions to the planning requirements, affidavit land location. You might, if somebody qualifies for an exemption, they come to the court, or for the commissioner, so here's my affidavit. That's how I qualify for the exemption, and the commissioner says, yeah, you're right. You can go forward with that plat, right?
That's the one.
So that, I would just maybe tweak that, topic heading, just to make it clear that there, what you're getting is a certificate or a certification of exemption.
So they have to file that affidavit.
They would have to follow that with their division of land. So that they're exempt.
So how do we confirm, I mean, when they file it, there's no certification by the commissioner that it's been approved?
Well, the commissioner has approved it. There has to be a document.
There's have to be a document that the commissioner would have to sign off on.
Chris, would that be, okay, the most fresh one on our minds is the last board meeting when I brought that division of land. You're saying that from this point forward, I brought it to the board, the board approved it. I could sign off on it and they just don't record it. This is a division of land for tracks, not a subdivision.
You sign it, there probably needs to be they just file that with the clerk. It goes in the public, in the minutes of the court as a public record, and that protects them and it protects the court. There probably ought to be a requirement that it be in file in the clerk's office.
Would that be attached to the plat?
It should be.
Though that shows the division.
If they're doing a division of land, they're gonna have to follow it with their clerk anyway. So in order for her to accept the division of land that doesn't have a final plat or any plat, then it has to have an affidavit saying that it's exempt from the platting procedures due to these rules and regulations that a commissioner signed off on.
I would like, an additional, something that's not in there, something for you all to think about, an additional process. None of the people on the court today are in my mind, but there have been some characters historically, a long time ago, in Blanco County Commissioner Court history, and I would like to see an additional process that once a commissioner has signed off on this and somebody takes it and files it to that ultimately there's some sort of report or mechanism. I don't want the commissioner's court to be in the approval process, but I would like the commissioner's court to be aware of what a commissioner is signing off on.
I can agree with that.
Now, wouldn't there be a signature area on the affidavit?
Yeah.
Application or whatever, from the attorney, where the commissioner signs.
Right, so let's just say I did one and I signed off on it. I need to come back and put it on an agenda to, how would you word it, but to say that this happened in my precinct, I signed off on an affidavit.
Just to inform the court.
Just to inform, right. And it's a little bit of paper trail that actually will get into our minutes. Otherwise, it won't get into our minutes, it'll just go straight to the clerk's office.
Would the commissioner's signature be notarized? Or just signature?
I don't have anything, nice to you.
Okay. So
I don't know if this,
They can sign it first.
so it's with us.
Okay. Need some sort of procedure. Okay. I think the affidavit contents are spelled out in that section pretty clearly. But I will look at it about,
that's the, that's not right. Right, that's, I'll work on the word.
in the definition section, under fire marshal, I've added that language.
What section is that?
It's in the definition section under 10.
Page
106, 100.
So,
Senior fire. Now, as we built our fire inspection code, we listed him as a fire inspector, not technically a marshal.
it's also in 203, and the phrase fire marshal is in there. We have a, no, the definition is a fire official, that's the statutory language.
Because a fire marshal is required to be
Peace officer, peace officer. Fire official can or cannot. So fire official, I believe, is a broader term than ours. Presently is not, although he wants to be.
The reason I inserted that is, if later on in the ordinance, the fire official has to inspect the roadway is intended for, let's say, over 6 acres private streets in that subdivision. They could, if we require our own standards, that's fine. This was just as a backup, that the fire marshal can say your road is too narrow.
You just need to, everywhere where it's marshal, it needs to be official.
So, back up, 106. 106, 100, affidavit with the land location. I have been there, it says refer to the county order on affidavit of land location. Do we need to do an order? I don't know that we have an order in place. I mean, it's in our rules and regulations, but I don't know that there's ever been an order.
I insert there the section that applies to, that you, if you pass this with those changes, that's your order. It's just county order, doesn't necessarily have to be there.
Okay.
Please see section so-and-so.
As part of our checklist for that, do we need to add that the fire official sign off on the roads?
The fire officials never sign off on the road. They do set will sign off on the roads.
What's the point in having an inspector if he's not?
They should only be, in my opinion, the fire official is only inspecting the connections and maybe the road going to the water storage tank.
I didn't get that from Mr. Bass's comments. I misunderstand you because I thought maybe you were referencing capacity of the roadway for fire engines and emergency vehicles.
He would inspect the plan that the developer proposes, and if it's too narrow, not adequate, the fire marshal or fire official could say, now you need to bring it up to 50 foot.
Now, your thinking is, you already have 2 other people doing that, county commissioner and engineer.
We're paying an engineering company to inspect our roads, the way they're constructed, their density and everything else. But their final approval be sufficient.
Again, that was my thought at the time, was we needed a backup position in case the court ruled that you couldn't regulate the private roads by the same standard.
So then the engineer wouldn't necessarily be involved with the fire marshal line.
Yeah.
Fire official, they got to be doing it.
Definitely see if there were fire departments involved, how it is, so
Sure.
Okay, 205. We inserted rainwater harvesting. We need to rainwater harvesting is added to the definitions under that section. My intention is to add some reference to those documents that
You'll do that?
I think we also changed the can to a may.
sorry.
We need to change the can to a may, where there says that can supplies sufficient water. Very end of the paragraph. 205, 103, 104.
103, 104. Where is that?
Page 53 and 54.
Sorry.
Page 53, 54. And 57.
Sorry. You wanted to change that from what?
From can to may.
What was, what was that, 205, 103 were?
The very end of the paragraph. The one was the language you added in 103, 104, 105.
Okay.
The names I have, and they're highlighted in green,
Yes.
so you want to take this name and put it on can?
No, take out can and make it.
Oh, can provide.
Yeah. Okay.
So probably all sign on the next item. For the benefit of everyone listening. It has become very clear to me that we're going to meet again and we're not gonna adopt anything today. We're gonna have a clean version to adopt at a future meeting. With that said, what's the next?
I need to go back to 108. (108), 130. This is just for clarification on the available of the judges, county judge's office, or relief form. Written request for relief form. In order to protect that form.
Yeah. It's,
There is on page 130.
Is there a form? Okay, so, okay. It's available in the judge's office, but it's also in the rules and regulations.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that was.
Well, I'd rather take it out of available to the judge's office and if it's in the rules and if it's online.
I agree with you. it's available, then
Just leave it.
yeah. Submit a written request relief form prior to the consent time.
At the most, you could say contained in these rules. So,
So in that word in there, brings something up to me, if I'm skipping, please stop me and we'll get to it another time, but so there's wording here and there where the person subdividing land is the owner of the land. So the question on the table is, does the person dividing the tract have to be the owner of that property, or can they just be a representative?
I think whoever appears and says, I'm appearing on behalf of X, who is the owner needs to also be signing something saying, I've designated Y as my representative.
All right, and how is that? I mean, because I can type something up with a letterhead, and I mean, how do we have it all to
Notarize statement from the owner.
So, do you know Judge Kelly over in Kerr County?
Yes.
He's a fairly experienced lawyer. And he has, not long ago, opined that an option purchase is not ownership.
Right.
Okay. So,
There is a provision in the statute that subdivision by the owner, it doesn't matter whether it's been done a deed or a contract or a deed. I'm just saying there needs to be something there where the owner of land agrees that, yeah, I'm dividing it and Joe can speak for him.
can I take you a step further? That's off a little bit on a tangent. If in the end, the commissioner's court disapproves something, we don't like it disapproved, and it's gonna become a matter of litigation, doesn't the owner need to technically be the party that sues the county?
Yes.
Okay.
The true party of interest, if it is in fact the owner, typically, you're gonna find that, there may be underlying reasons that the true owner isn't disclosed, but I guess what I'm saying is, the true party of interest, whether it be the developer or the owner, and at some point, those are gonna merge, but I think you can require, certainly, you can require an acknowledgement by the title owner that this is a representative.
Yeah, I was taking you into procedure because I wanted to argue that a developer cannot, on his or her own, sue without the owners, sue the commissioner's court successfully.
So in section 203-140, under 3G, basically take the page number out and just refer to the section.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sections 202, 203, 204, they need to be combined. One used to talk about the master plan, the other was preliminary plat, the other was the final plat. Since we've combined those all now into just a plat, there's a lot of duplicative provisions there and confusing as to what we're requiring.
Which one? Sorry, which one do you want?
202, 203, and 204.
So Mr. Bash, I think you have it as a plat application. But official wording if you chose. And then 203 is just a flat.
So combine what number, 202?
202, or I'm sorry, 202, 203, and 204.
Okay. I'll look at that.
So if we're on 202 for a moment, I'm designing to interject. 202.160,
202,
160.
Okay.
That whole piece seems unnecessary to me. Yeah.
I agree.
And 202.150. I thought that, he's talking about 5 years, that the application, I guess, considered out for 5 years. And I thought that later we said 2 years.
Hey,
Seems like we need to conform to.
That's why I said they need to be defined, they have different.
You think later is 203 or 204?
Wasn't it, Kim, that the master plan was good for 5 years, but on a plat, if they did not finish the plat within 2 years, then it would come forward?
Yes, I think that's correct.
So the policy question of the commission is, do you want 2 years or 5 years? An application can later, before we call it. Stay.
So I guess the question, if you do away, I don't know what your thought process was on a plat application versus a plat. I don't know what that plat application was designed for in your world.
the plat application is just your basic information. It says, here's my name, here's the property, here. Lay out what you're filing, and then you attach the plat to the application.
What we're talking about is the package that comes to Commissioner's Court.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the package.
And I guess I was just trying to confirm and make sure he wasn't trying to give us, not call a preliminary plat, but it's a plat application that someone could bring to you and say, hey, this is what we're anticipating on doing. But
Your plat application is just your basic information, kind of listed in one or two sheets of paper, I'm not sure.
I think
So they're
talking about is.
so then it answers the question to you.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
But does that actually apply anymore, since we don't have it? It was for the preliminary, you had 2 years to come back to the final.
Right, but what we're talking about now is, everybody knows we're moving toward final. And maybe they filed the fees, and maybe they've done everything, but there's one piece that's missing. And the commissioners are not saying that. Then they can just lay there on your desk for 2 years.
So there's a provision in there for that it's 45 days if they don't submit the correct app for additional information.
Then why do we?
But if they submitted everything properly and correctly, and they just hadn't started construction, they have 2 years to start construction, or it just goes away
After being approved.
after being approved.
But would they have to reapply at that point?
After 2 years, they have to pay all the fees, but there's our rules called the change, but
That doesn't seem clear.
Well, somebody files their plat, but then they gotta get their financing and line up all that. It takes longer than 45 days. It takes more like 2 years. I certainly see that happening.
Look at it, if they reapply, once they have all that together.
And then if it exceeds 2 years, they've got to reapply. But if they get it done within the 2 years, that's okay. Rather than 5 years.
Well, that brings up the question, now that we're understanding it, that it's gone through approval, and now it's a question of them doing the project and getting the permits to do the project and completing the project within 2 years. And now I'm wondering if that's longer. Do it both, as opposed to them having to come back here, or
A construction bond is different, 2 years.
2 years.
So it's the same thing as construction bond. So once they file the plat with their construction bond, they have a 2-year period to complete the construction of it. So, and if they don't, they've got to do one of two things, either replat, resubmit, or extend.
okay, I'm good.
One thing related to that is the regulations, they have to submit it by CD, which is kind of antiquated now with a thumb drive, which is what kind of is. The problem with that is we risk there being a virus on that thumb drive. So our policy is we don't accept thumb drives from outside of people. I was kind of working with Chris saying, what else can we do? And he said, maybe like a Google Drive or OneDrive, that they can download it to that. And you could have that to send it to the outside agencies.
And in my opinion, we need to figure out general language, because technology keeps changing on us.
Kind of electronic copy.
In a form acceptable to the commissioners or in current form acceptable to the commissioners.
Something.
Okay.
Can you, turn Kim's down just a notch?
Mr. Bass, I think all of us have a few editorial changes that are just clerical things or such. Would it be helpful to you if one of us kind of combined everybody's non-substantive changes and submitted those to you?
Well, the thing is, yes, I'm sure the answer is going to be somewhat yes, except that these things are drift into policy. That's why I like to have these discussions with commissioners.
Correct.
I think that the definition of what's a non-substantive change is where we run into a little bit of trouble, but if you want to submit to me your best effort, I don't want to end up with a document that's patched together and not cohesive. So
So like one of the things I found is, in one place, like in the introduction, you say subdivision rules and regulations. The actual title is development rules and regulations. And then later on in the document, we refer to it as rules and regulations. So, that would be something just for consistency's sake that
you'll make those changes and send it to me and highlight what you're changing. That would be good. I just need to be able to track it without doing a word search.
So I imagine everybody has some things. Do you have more items?
Let me think.
Or is this all right for us to just scatter down and hit you with ideas?
You asked for a rule on regulating the discharge of firearms in subdivision, that is statutory, so I've added this language. It's prohibited on lots that are 10 acres or smaller.
What page is that on?
I don't have a page, I'm looking at it. It's not paginated, but it's 320.
Um,
320 is the main section. It goes through 320.005. That comes from, I forget which county.
Coleman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I don't have it here.
Don't have it.
Mr. Bass, the legislature, not this last session, they, here's all the HOA, anyways, after the authority. Great. So,
I just have to check. But I don't know that the commissioner should have authority.
So we don't have the firearms piece. What is it that you are, what is it that your ordinance does?
Well, it just takes and it recites the state law in sections of the state law that prohibit the discharge of firearms in subdivisions under 10 acres. And that was a
what's
request.
the workshop? You remember the workshop?
We have residents in Lincoln County with less than 10 acres that are passionate about their shooting, which is like you're talking about the state law.
If you have any rules and regulations.
Has to be your regulation.
So it wouldn't affect anybody that previous unless they re-subdivide.
Unless they do something that alters status quo.
Remember how that workshop go,
This was a request made and included, and so, I included it.
Which one of us wants to restrict firearms on 10 acres or less?
It wasn't a restriction, I asked if it was to clarify. Because so many people do call about
Yeah.
it. It wasn't restricting.
But if it's state law, we're not the ones regulating the state laws.
Well, I understood, Mr. Massey, state law, if we include it.
It is the authority to say that.
I think that could be left up to the homeowners association, their rules and regulations.
well, it's stripped of their authority, I believe.
So they don't have that in.
Okay, we'll look and see.
Remember, we had a gentleman at a gun range on the border. It's quite a conversation. That time we had a game board in 110. Just trying to fly, well,
Well, honestly, the county's not getting less hits. There's only other trend more people, more divided. And if everybody that is here today is grandfathered, not sure it's bad.
I understand, yeah. The counties that brought it up, they were growing at a fast rate at that time, and they never really had a problem.
Gun rights is very sensitive subject. My attitude on it is if existing rules are not being altered, the prospective application of the statute being going forward that they adopt this, that you limit such things to lots that are over 10 acres, then I think that's the best you can do. As far as general hunting, that same rule, we would just refer to the Parks and Wildlife rule. If they're going to take 10 acres or more, that's fine. I don't think that's personally, I don't, gun, once you discharge the bullet, it's going to go farther.
So your language creates a rule, or just, it goes beyond the statutory authorization?
You have authority under the statutes to create a rule that limits.
And your language exercises that authority?
Yes.
I think, so we can keep moving, that's a placeholder, that should be highlighted, because I'm not sure that we all agree on that.
Okay. That's all that I have of substance. Now, the checklist, the addendums, all of that, harmonizing the changes and the topics of discussion. I'm trying to give you a time frame. I think I can get it done here fairly soon, but I'm not real sure.
Yeah, because there's still a checklist that says first reading. I guess that is related to the preliminary plat. And there is no first reading, even, it's just a reading.
When does the final plat have to be presented?
Well, the final plat is the plat. There's not a preliminary, there's not a final, there's just a plat for everything. And everything that you want has to be in that plat.
It completes that before they can file. She can reject it if for some reason
She goes through the checklist and there's something missing, she can say it's an incomplete application.
And we talked about before that somebody can go to the commissioners with a preliminary plat, and they can bring it to commissioners' report. Do you want any of that language in the regulations?
No such thing as preliminary plat.
There's not supposed to be.
It's plat.
Correct, but we talked about sometimes developers will kind of bring a conceptual plat as one, or to discuss it to see if it would be something that they would approve. If we don't want to do that, that's fine. But if the court wants to do that, I'm just asking if we need any language.
There's a provision now that they can come to the commissioner's court preliminarily, I can't use the word preliminary. As a conceptual plan. You can discuss that all you want, but nothing starts the time clock until an application and the plat is filed.
Correct, the commissioner may want the other commissioners to discuss the matter.
We just said we could.
I think you can.
You can bring it to commissioner's court to discuss it.
Just don't.
So just, we don't want any language on that, it's just something that we can do as the court.
It's something we did do in June, on the Rose Ranch, proposal. And the agenda was worded in such a way that it was just for discussion and no action to be taken. okay? Because it was just
Okay.
a presentation.
So under your definitions, says conceptual planning for development of all of the real property to be included in a proposed subdivision that may be completed in different units or phases over time. So I think that might cover it, I'm not sure.
On the matter of the fact that there's just a plat, I'm looking at 206-130. And near the end of 206-130, it talks about 60 days.
Yeah, that should be 30 days.
My new list is 30. And then, moving back up in 206 to 2050, it talks about submission. And it says, and has said, shall only be received as published,
Plat submission dates.
plat submission dates, and I wrote a question out
Yeah.
for the opportunity to speak with you. What's a reasonable number of dates? Is it, because it says, I think, a year, dates a year, is it 4, 6, 12, 20, 30, 40, 365? What's a reasonable number of dates?
I don't know.
Because we do know that there are 26 basically opportunities, more or less, because there's about that many commissioner court meetings. And so we do know that there's Wednesday before a commissioner court is a cutoff date for getting things before then. But that's a real hard, if Ms. Harrington has to do that 26 times a year, it's not easy.
The only problem I have with that is, there's nothing in, the statute now says that the plat application is final when the full package is presented to the court or their designee, whatever. So there's not a date submission date per se.
But in order to accompany that 30-day window, she has to give dates that, she can't just take it any time, because we might have to have a special meeting to make it happen, and that's not sufficient.
I see the submission day as the day, we don't really have a stamp, but figuratively that she stamps it complete and ready for the commissioner. And at that point, 30 days starts running.
Yeah.
But my question is, if we were to invite the county impose and say, received on plat submission dates, and plat submission dates are this, and this, I'm just curious what a reasonable number is in your.
If you want to make it coincide with the commissioner's court meeting dates, so
What if it was only once a month?
I think that's too restrictive. I think you're on the 30-day window, so if it once a month, you've already, it's somewhat problematic, I'm getting it on the calendar.
Okay. There's some language on the filing checklist. On application, it's titled final checklist.
Checklist paper.
And then there's a continuation page. And bottom it says, all items on this checklist must be in the hands of the county judge's office no less than 30 days. No less than 30 days prior to Commissioner's Court hearing date. That means 31 days or more. And it just, that language doesn't seem to jive with the 30-day requirement for action. If somebody turns it in 32 days, no less than 30, so 32 days before the Commissioner's Court hearing date, and we don't have to 32nd day, we're outside of compliance.
Judge, if I might, that was for the preliminary class. And then when he goes back and kind of combines all the checklists for preliminary, master, and the final, that kind of language should be removed, because for the final, it all has to be, county has to have it all before it ever goes to Commissioner's Court.
Correct. For you, I have a little minor, 306-100. I will get a scavenger hunt for you. There's a word more that should be on.
Yes. I have that one also.
That's all I have.
All right, I have a pretty full document here.
I do have one more, policy issue. I think this is in the RV part. It's under the tiny homes. So I don't have I'll print it out 2 pages, which has the section in it. But basically, the language says, the RV service buildings shall provide for.
Service buildings.
And my question is, I actually am very opinionated on this and fine with the language as it stands, but I wanted you, as the expert, to provide to the commissioners either a level of comfort or caution that we are using the words men's and women's restrooms.
Okay.
Which one? Well, I hate that one, because for me, it's perfectly logical and I'm totally fine with it. But,
So 120.004.
there may be another place or two where it says that.
Two. I have this one right here.
Well,
That would require 2 separate restrooms in a tiny home. Right?
This is just for the service.
There's some, I believe I put some language in there about the restroom in a tiny home. If they have a restroom, it does not require to be.
I think this is talking about like a traditional KOA park or RV park and a building that has bathrooms and showers. You got a men's restroom there.
Inside and women's side, you have to have
Right.
whatever side. I don't think we should.
I just wanted to bring it up again. I feel the way Commissioner Eager does, but I want to bring it up in case we are overly enthusiastically inviting a lawsuit.
So, anywhere it refers to a service building requirement, you want it to articulate a men's restroom or women's restroom. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Thoughts?
Do you have a rule or regulation that requires gender specificity? Well, if there's a women's restroom and a men's restroom, and a man, what started out as a man is now a woman, decides to go into the woman's restroom. If they identify as a woman, I suppose that's going to be permitted.
We can cross that stream. I just want to make sure that this is enough restrooms, or that we bother to put a label on anybody's restroom.
Okay.
I just have, I think, one more question.
Okay.
No, I have two more. It says that each RV pad and tire yard shall have GPS coordinates. Do we do that now, Ms. Kathy? I thought she might be here, but she do that today.
She's supposed to.
So this isn't, even though it's new to the language, it's not really something new that we're not going to do.
Now, each tiny home should have, one address and also save time, 5 minutes, save somebody time.
So, the next one is 120.007. It's called penalties.
$120.07.
Yes, sir. It says that violations will result in a denial of utility services. How does the county do that? How do we deny utility services?
There is a requirement that the service provider will not hook up a premises until there's been a plat approved.
Right.
And so I'm not sure that's violations of this order will result in the denial of utility services. That came out of your original statute. But it really sort of presupposes that the plat has been approved, or at least the process has been reviewed preliminarily. It doesn't provide that as a penalty in mind. Does that make sense?
I'm wondering if we could come up with other language that's more of a roadmap for how the court goes about. Maybe we get to the same place where utilities are not provided, but what do we do to get there? Because we're not the utility.
Yeah. Well, the problem was that people were subdividing land, getting an order, you don't know that they're doing it until you find somebody's already hooked up, got water, got electricity.
And so there's a penalty, and they've got water and electricity, and I don't expect Commissioner Riley to go out there and cut off their electricity. So how do we, I think we need a roadmap of what our options are. Besides, we're sending anybody out to cut off electricity, the commissioner is.
We might, I'll have to give that some soft thought. Normally speaking, your authority would be contained in B. There are criminal civil penalties in B, but you might want to articulate what those might be, how you go about doing it. Okay, what else?
at this point, we as a commissioners board still has the authority on subdivisions or the regulations that we're going to put forth. The state is not like us.
Under my interpretation of what the state has done, I think that's correct.
Is this going
But I'm not willing to say that you might not be sued under the interpretation that that's not what the legislature intended.
right? 'Cause I know that the last time we talked, you said that it's possible that this would work itself out in your meeting.
So I can't go beyond that. I think you can take the position that the provision of, no, if you're not making provisions for a private subdivision, you don't have to apply for a plat. You're saying, no, we think to do it. You're gonna have to file a plat irrespective if you provide interior streets and roads for 10 acres or more.
And those interior roads will be large specs.
Be what?
Will be large specs that are in the rules and regulations.
Yes.
And for Commissioner Riley's benefit, the way that can be changed and we can be told not to apply our regulations and enforce them that way is either the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court, whoever winds up being, or the legislature, depending on the time,
Right.
tells us definitively we cannot.
Otherwise, I think you're just opening Pandora's box if you take a position on otherwise.
And I think that potentially a district court can join us in the meantime, but
What you're saying is that we just take that position while the state is shut us down.
The law is uncertain. You take a position that requires the plat. If somebody thinks strongly about it, they can file suit and join you. And then we'll go from there.
do you know, because of your firm's representation of the Texas County Commissioners and Judges Association, do you know if a suit like that were to be filed, whether it's us or another county?
We normally learn of it.
But learning is one thing, do you know if the association or the other group would be wanting to partake?
That would be a decision that had to be made by the executive bodies of those entities. My guess is that they take a position against that something.
This is of interest statewide, is it not?
And I know of other counties that have asked me the same question, and I've given them essentially the same advice that, in my opinion, they need to take a position on this one way or the other. But it looks to me like compelling public reasons require them to take the position that they're still subject to regulation.
Kind of go over a few things that came from Doucette, just for clarification. He had another chance to look at some of these things that we made some changes, corrections. Table 307, it had minimum grade, and he changed it to maximum grade, and it was 12, 12, and 12%, and he changed it from a 12 to a 10 to a 9, from a local to a minor to a major, as you can see here on the table. I don't think that's a major ordeal. And then at the bottom of that same table, he went from he had a 3.2, it was a 3.2, he changed it to 4%, and a 3.5, he changed it to 4%.
Don't say I changed it.
That's, Doucette and Associates, our engineering.
That's kind of funding committee that we had minimum grade instead of maximum grade.
Yes, and that's what he said.
There's theoretically could be,
Right. Yeah, it was just some corrections that he needed to make within the rules and regulations.
That be included in the.
That's, yes. On page 86, there's drainage. I'll get to it here. 312 is what it is. 312. Okay, so 312, 100, he went from a 10-year to a 25-year rainfall frequency for bridges and culverts and storm sewers. And he went from a 5-year to a 10-year rainfall frequency for roadside ditches. So those right here. Those right here.
what does that do to?
It's basically their sizing of their culverts and things of that nature. And that's things that you said we'll be looking at.
Okay, but, you know, the outer limits, you're talking 100 year, 500 years, but what do?
That I don't know. I mean, I'm just going by his recommendations.
Same principle.
Yeah, but I wish I knew what the effect of that was. Generally speaking.
Right. But as long, I mean, and then I'll have some more on 312-150. He did some more of those corrections and changes. So we went from the street drainage shall be designed, the basis of 5 unit 10. And I think he was trying to make all these match. He was keeping them all in the same. And then he changed this, the maximum street grade, he made it all here where it coincides with the table that we just referenced. And then he went from a 10-year to a 25-year frequency and all up there.
Okay.
But can you help me to, so I'm not able to get a big picture on this. Does this mean that we're just taking averages of those years? Or is there anything that happened within?
I think it's an average of the years. And I mean, I don't know, we might have an engineer out here in the audience that might be able to assist on those calculations, but I don't.
I was just gonna say that in all those circumstances, it's always referred to a one-time event in the time period. So it would be whatever the most extreme measure occurred within the time period stated. So it would then have to handle the capacity, if it goes from 10 to 25 years, instead of handling most of the capacity at the highest event in 10 years, it becomes the highest event in 25 years. It's substantial.
Which is a big change.
And this is the engineer that we're relying on to design, to make sure that the designs are suitable for our county, so these are his recommendations. So like if we had an engineer for the county, be the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, all county roads?
Yeah, this is for this subdivision,
New construction.
new construction subdivision.
Subdivision.
I know that I have some subdivisions that are in the process or trying to get approved, that he has having a hard time getting, new drawings and, culvert sizes and things like that, and, that's what he's really pushing for, trying to make sure that the flow will work and all of it.
All right, so forgive me, I just want to make sure I understand. So subdivision is going to put in a road. There's a draw, big draw, that the road's going to go through and over. And 24 years ago, massive flooding occurred that would go over the road as proposed, as drawn. That's what we're talking about. So we want to make it to where it won't. We want to make that road overcome what that event that happened 24 years ago.
Can I do another scenario with that, in 2015 flood? If you were doing something now in a 10-year deal, it would be accomplished in that instead of, the 2015, 10 years. But if you're asking to combine it, it might reach out in 2001 flood or another flood that might even been bigger or so. So it's going to take the worst one of over that 25 years, it would be 2015. Right, just so happens we're within the 10-year study too. But in another 10 years or so, it's something like they would reach out and catch that 2015 flood in that study. Am I correct?
Which, obviously, we're not the only county that do that and associates works for. They do this for Bastrop, Hayes, and other counties, so he's trying to keep it uniform, probably across the board. Best practices, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So, 312, 170, same thing, he went from a 5-year to a 10-year. And then 312, 180 from a 5-year to a 10-year. On 312, 200, he added some verbiage.
I hate to pick on this, but I just have to. So understanding from Commissioner Weir's point of view, today, and understanding what the gentleman in the audience said about single event, today, the 2015 flood is taken into account.
If we're on a 5-year basis, it's not.
Okay. If we go to a 10-year basis, it is, and certainly a 25-year basis, it's taken into account. And it's probably a good thing because that's a pretty bad flood. And people were stranded, a lot of people were stranded, we were pretty busy. So we go to 25 years, and that's 2015 to 2040. So 2041, and that was a 500-year flood, as I told. So 2041, the next subdivision that gets built in 2041, that event drops off, right?
So by the way,
So roads between now and 2040 would be built to 2015.
It would be the most extreme, that is a 500-year debt.
Standard. But assuming nothing happens like that in 2040, then subdivision roads can start becoming less sufficient.
If you roll back,
If you haven't had that event drops off.
I guess the study would finish, sure.
I'm just making sure I understand the process.
that's,
Some point in 2040 can figure that out.
right, that's it. I'm just talking about the methods that, that I've been proposed.
Okay, all right.
312, 200, talking about, he just wants a little bit of leniency there on other approved methods that he could, I don't think that it clarified how just some things that he can work with throughout the deal. Testing and inspections, 314.
Could I ask a clarifying point?
Yes, sir.
What you're mentioning now, I had not seen before.
Okay.
So those suggested changes need to be given.
Yes. I sent them to her yesterday, or whenever. We'll focus on all,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll let her look at that and get them all corrected, approved, and then submit it back to you to do your final review. 314. So 314, that's gonna be inspections. One thing that I wanted to make sure, because the way this is changing from the way it's been done in the past to what's happening in today's world with this new rule, these rules and regulations, is Blanco County will contract directly with Doucette and Associates. In the past, we've made the developers contract with him. And he would do inspections based off of our rules and regulations. This will just have him technically working for us a little bit. We're paying the bill. With that being said, he has ran into issues, whenever he does his proposals to the developer, he allows 2 inspections per whatever, and there's a couple of developers that have been given a hard time and not following the rules, and he's having to make 3 or 4 trips out back and forth. So with that, trying to get those additional trips will be charged directly, or will be charged as well. So we just need to make sure that we can pay for his services if the developer fails to meet the requirements multiple times after being told.
That'd be 314-1.
Right, 314-100, yeah, so the additional county inspection fees for retest will also be reimbursed by the developer. So it'll be like a re-inspection fee, basically.
Doesn't the last line cover that?
Yeah, that's what, I just added that, that's added, that wasn't in y'all's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait a minute. It already says it costs for retest.
It wasn't that, I added it around.
The line before the.
I think part of that retesting was based on the samples, the site samples is what he was referring to.
Wouldn't that be a failed test, or?
Well, we can get some clarification from you, set and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yes, I see what, I'm okay with council, we'll see the reason that that was right.
It'll be 314, or 315, 450.
$315.
315, 450. That was just, he's trying to reference back to some of the sections that it refers to. Um, 316, 410 goes from a 5-year to a 10-year. And then his fee schedule, he allowed for all of that in the fee schedule.
Where's that?
It's on page 106, but independence one.
The fee schedule, fees, can you say what you said again?
So the fee schedule on everything that's in agreement with that,
Why?
to accommodate for the, more than 2 reviews that are required, if more than 2. And also to cover the costs the cost of what they're gonna be doing business on.
This is one of those pages that, you know, we try to make it, and Mr. Bass, this is his expertise, we try to make things so they are durable and can last after changes come about. This is one of those pages that we'll just have to change periodically depending on
The contracts that we incur through,
our costs, inflation and whatever.
you know, I know that they've spent, the sooner that we can get, and that's one thing that I've been discussing with Tony, whenever these people turn in their new development plans, doing the contract like this, we can submit it straight to Gazette, and they can start looking at the hydraulics and all that other stuff. You know, where other counties that have a county engineer, that's what their office will be doing. We don't have that engineer. We're based on the commissioners serving in that role. This would be a benefit to us. Have somebody that has the manpower and the knowledge to look at the drainage studies and things of that nature that I don't technically know.
Okay.
That was all of his.
Mr. Riley. Mr. Weir. Mr. Weir. That's it? We have to take this picking over there.
In the introduction, it says, Commissioners Court may amend the rules, to make non-substantive changes.
What's non-substantive?
I say what we're doing today is substantive, so I would like to take out the non-substantive.
The problem is, if there is a clerical error, misstatement, you can make that change as long as it doesn't affect the bottom line or somebody having to incur more cost. If it's going to cost something to comply, that's a substantive change.
So one requires a hearing and the other doesn't, correct?
Requires a hearing.
So maybe we can clarify non-substantive changes without a hearing.
Yeah. Look at that section again. The reason typos can be corrected. It's clear from the context of the intention of the court. But I have to give some.
Yeah.
Okay.
Page 31, the RV parks, 7. You have 24-foot wide roads. Is that sufficient for emergency vehicles?
That's actually,
And 24-foot pavement out there.
what page you say it was?
31?
Page 7, or item 7, hard surface private streets,
Yes.
width of which shall not be less than 24 feet.
Mr. Eager, did the change on your hard surface content in this new proposal to go away from just the base and went to pavement?
They, chip seal, like this, or concrete.
It's not based on daily traffic.
What's that?
It's not based on daily traffic. The width of the road.
Like that, just took the standards specs that we had at the time. And the pavement was 24 foot. And I believe I have placed in there 60 foot. Right away. I'm not sure of that.
You still have something in there about, gotta be able to park up to like 5 RVs next to the office, so that you're checking.
That was in some other rules that I read to, keep from having a, gym on a street, because you have a bunch of RVers coming in all the time.
I've experienced it.
So we're doing 24 feet?
Yeah.
Page 70, 304.110. Blanco County has been designated by PCEQ for licensing regulations of septics. Is that just for residential or does that include commercial?
Most commercial already. He's regulated for all on-site services.
Okay.
What was that, right?
Well, there's no change to it, but it was 304.110. Page 76, 307.251 at the very end. It refers to a contract.
Carried over.
So the standard specs are hereby amended and incorporated into this contract,
No, it should read, just whatever the
the rules and regulations.
rules and regulations.
Three oh seven point 260, should that be developer? Very, says the owner or owner's representative, should that be a developer?
The builder, the contractor, I mean, the developer, would be sufficient being a developer.
Is that fine?
Developer?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we use throughout the regulations. We very rarely use owner regulations.
Where is that?
307.260, first line.
The owner or owner's representative? Yes. Or you asking for a change?
Yes.
Make that the developer instead of the owner or the owner's representative. It's the same thing as the owner's representative, but in my opinion.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Does that cause you?
I'm just trying to make it consistent. I think we use developers throughout all the rest of the regulations.
As long as we get notified, it's all that matters.
We used to go over 64 times. Okay. 63 times.
Okay, what's next?
318.200. It says Blanco County will not accept streets built within the subdivision. And private maintenance will be required. But if they meet county specs and the commission reports agree to assume the roads, we will.
No, yes, we could. We might. We might.
Which one's
It's 318. However, you know, if it's a gated community, we cannot accept it. So, I mean, very rarely do you get into a subdivision that's not gated in today's world, in my opinion. I mean, all the subdivisions out there seem to be gated. So, that's a state deal that, you know, if it's gated, we cannot accept it.
Whether that public road is escaping.
Right.
You can't have gates on public street. But you can have private streets, and then that brings up to.
In today's world with Amazon so frequently visiting all these, how's that not a public street? It's a public person.
I agree.
So,
They throw the gates open during everything, but
yeah.
lay out.
That's all I have.
Well, can we look at that? Here, it's the sentence, the creation of the HOA and all subdivisions may be required to assume maintenance of these streets. Is that the language you're talking about?
Yes.
Why do we have a say in that?
We don't.
Well, then why is
Well,
it
I mean, which part don't we have?
authority to require an HOA?
I think the terminology she was trying to get out of is trying to say that Blanco County will not accept when she's saying that we, you know, there is a possibility that we would if the stars and moons align correctly.
I accept the streets.
She's trying to get that up.
Right, might or might not. But the next sentence, I don't even understand why that's there.
To try to
To inform, I guess, the general public that they may be required to
you know,
Maintain
pay for the streets, yeah.
I guess it's
I think we have language that says,
it's gratuitous, but I don't care.
I think we have language that says they have to put it on the plat, that the roads will be maintained by the residents of Nye County.
Why? Because that might change something.
yeah,
I think it just, well, I have to look back, it basically says the county may not be required, I think that's true.
But someday gates could be taken down, things could change.
but it would require going back through work in order to accept the roads and take over the roads.
It's great approach.
It would, but you wouldn't have a new plan, so it's a road to go.
They would have to be brought up, so that
Unless that meeting minutes would have to be attached to the plat on record, if you was to ever do that.
I think just thinking through it, the court would come back and say, you know, Jones subdivision previously, we did not assume the road, and we're not going to accept individual roads or all of the roads. You have to make an order that says what you're going to do.
Right, but not do plat.
I don't think that requires anything like that. Is that it?
That's it.
So our plan is, this is the 18th.
The 18th, when you get your,
So we'll have some to you back there.
and I will be able to turn it around, double check everything, reformat probably within 10 days of that.
So, the first regular meeting of the court, seems like hopefully this final iteration, we no longer need to have these dialogues, it's not extended dialogue. Our first meeting in November is the 14th.
14th December.
No.
And so, I'm set for trial the week of the 13th.
Do we, I know about Christmas, are we having any thoughts of not meeting the week of Thanksgiving? What about the 28th?
I'm open.
So we could potentially plan on trying to put this to bed on the 28th?
Yeah. That 28th, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to get notice in the newspaper.
Well, it's a good thing it's not long because we only have one in district. You have any advice for what we do today and every day in the 28th?
Well, I need to get from you the editorial changes that you can make. I'll go through and reformat and repaginate and try to get all the documents in line. I will send a copy of my preliminary in clean version to the court. Between now and the 28th, I have to publish that there is an available copy for inspection. So I will try to turn that around as soon as you get stuff to me, and I think that'll give us time to get all that done.
What I meant to be asking is, there might be pressures applied to the court tomorrow.
Yeah.
And given our conversation today, is there any reason why we wouldn't want to proceed as if these are going to be the rules? Or if not, what rules are we under?
Well, we're presently under your old rule.
Yeah, they talk about preliminary plat.
Yeah. But that's, you sort of tend to ignore what's no longer the law. I don't know how many subdivisions have come up, since September the 1st, 19 to now. Those are all under the old rules. I think we can presume that if I get all of this stuff together and get it in a final document, we can publish it, have it available 30 days in advance of the hearing. I think that's doable. So I think today's meeting leads to a final document.
And that is the requirement for the days, so October 28th here.
And we do have to have another public hearing.
You have to notice a public hearing on the 28th,
30 days prior to,
and it has to be a notice in the paper at least 30 days before that date.
Oh, you're doing it, can we do that?
I'm sorry.
Can we do that? Pretty tight window for you.
Yeah, I can, I mean, I will have. I'll have to get something in the paper next week, excuse me, next week.
I'll try to get all that stuff to you.
Yeah.
Well, we're not publishing all of the revisions, just for notice.
I'll have to get the notice to the paper on Monday.
In the notice, it says that they can come and see a draft version. That doesn't mean you have to have a final version. You can see draft version. And I'll try to have a clean draft before.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Is there anything else from us? Do you have anything else?
All right, I appreciate it.
Is there a second?
Second.
We're discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those motion carries.
Yeah.